Dr. Mike Lacona is a professor of New Testament studies and happens to be one of the leading Christian apologists for the resurrection of Jesus. His massive 700-page tome on the evidence for the resurrection has cemented his place on the Mount Rushmore of Christian resurrection apologists. Given these accolades, it's all the more surprising that the resurrection accounts in the Gospels could have Dr. Lacona admitting the following.
I don't even have a plausible explanation for it. It baffles me. All right.
Aspects of the Gospel's resurrection narratives that allow a skeptical foot in the door are most assuredly the discrepancies among the narratives themselves and the confusion and ambiguity they elicit. The Gospel resurrection narratives seem to contain a plethora of contradictions and confusing plot holes. These perplexing narratives naturally prompt various questions. How many angels were at the tomb? Where and when did they appear, and what did they say and do? Did the women tell the disciples about the tomb before or after they encountered the angels, and at what point did the women encounter the risen Jesus? Were the disciples instructed to go to Galilee or not? Could the risen Jesus be touched or not? Again, many such questions abound. Yet one of the more confounding questions surrounds the circumstances regarding exactly when and where the disciples first saw the risen Jesus, since the Gospels all seem to fundamentally disagree on the circumstances of this crucial event. Any proposed answers to this conundrum are not easy to pin down, as the resurrection narratives are saturated in ambiguity on this point specifically. In the Gospel of Matthew, the disciples go straight to Galilee, just as the angel said, and see Jesus there on a mountain for the first time. In Luke, two disciples unknowingly walk and converse with Jesus outside of Jerusalem. Once they realize they have seen Jesus, they run to Jerusalem to tell the others, and Luke hints that Peter has somehow already seen Jesus as well. Then, Jesus subsequently appears to all the disciples at once. In the Gospel of John, Jesus appears to all the disciples, minus Thomas, in Jerusalem, and then appears to them in the same vein a week later with Thomas present. Jesus then subsequently appears to the disciples on the shore of Galilee. This Galilean meeting, then, seems to be distinct from the meeting in Matthew. Obviously, there's significant tension regarding the consistency, or lack thereof, of these narratives. The apologetic damage control with respect to the appearance narratives is typically to highlight the fact that Luke articulates Jesus appeared to the disciples over a span of 40 days. This allows the apologist to locate historicity in each separate account of the Gospels, as each of these disparate accounts might genuinely relay separate appearances of Jesus to his disciples at different times over the 40-day time span. Thus, given this hypothesis, Jesus did appear to the disciples multiple times in both Jerusalem and Galilee. However, this doesn't neatly alleviate the tension in the appearance narratives. The issue isn't whether or not Jesus could have appeared to his disciples multiple times in different places over a span of 40 days. The issue is precisely how each gospel paints a remarkably different picture of where and when Jesus first appeared to his disciples, the circumstances that led to these first appearances, and the events that followed. And even allowing for the fact that Jesus appeared over a span of 40 days, we still don't have a clear answer to these questions in the gospel accounts. Enter Dr. Mike Lacona. Dr. Lacona was asked a question regarding this very issue during a Q&A. Here's how he responded.
Where was the first appearance? And was it Galilee or Jerusalem? I don't know. I thought I knew in the past that I could say it was Jerusalem, but now I don't know. And why did one change it? If one's in Jerusalem, the other, like Matthew and Mark have it. Matthew has it in Galilee, Mark implies it in Galilee. Luke and John had the first appearance in Jerusalem. Why did one of them change it? I don't know. That's something I don't know. I do think, I look at some things and I look through the Gospels and some of the differences I look and I say, I don't know that either. Now there are a handful of them, maybe a dozen of them that I could look at and say, these are relatively good candidates for being errors. I don't know that they're errors. I look in Plutarch and I say, well, there's some things that could be errors there, but you can't know for sure because there could be something going on you just don't know about. And there's about a dozen of these things in the Gospels. I looked at. These are relatively decent candidates for being errors. I don't know that they are, but they could be. They're all in the peripheral minor details. They don't change a thing. But the setting, the first appearance, whether it was in Galilee or Jerusalem, I have this strong suspicion that something is going on. It was changed intentionally. It was changed for a reason that the earliest believers could have recognized, but given the differences in cultures and stuff, it now eludes us. I just don't know why the difference.
There's a lot to digest here. First, notice that Dr. Lacona himself admits that he can't make heads or tails of where Jesus first appeared to his disciples. He claims that one or more of the gospel authors has intentionally changed the details for some unknown reason, while simultaneously being open to the possibility that what we have in the gospel narratives here might be relatively good candidates for being errors. That's a stunning admission from a Christian apologist. Now, Dr. Lacona does attempt to downplay this admission by claiming that these issues are all in the peripheral minor details. And this is where I depart from Dr. Lacona's sentiments. These issues do not merely concern peripheral minor details at all. We're talking about the moment the disciples first witnessed the risen Jesus. This is the culmination of the Gospels. This is the part where the entire ministry of Jesus is vindicated. This is the point where the disciples' faith, hope, and beliefs were restored and their worldview was flipped upside down. And we can't determine where this happened or when it happened or what events preceded and succeeded it. We can't determine which gospel author or authors decided to stretch the facts of this narrative and why they did so. We can't determine if the disciples saw Jesus the very same Easter Sunday in Jerusalem as Luke and John articulate, or if they had to wait a few days to travel back to Galilee to first see Jesus, as Matthew articulates and Mark implies. We can't determine if Jesus first appeared to a couple of disciples outside of Jerusalem and Peter at some point before appearing to all the disciples as Luke narrates, or if, instead, Jesus first appeared to all the disciples on a mountain in Galilee like Matthew narrates and as Jesus explicitly said he would when he appeared to the women earlier in the narrative. These are not peripheral, minor details. They're the glue that holds these narratives together. Admitting that one or more authors might have altered these details throws everything up in the air. If Jesus actually appeared to the disciples in Jerusalem first, then his words in Matthew to the women are in error. If Jesus instead appeared to the disciples in Galilee first, then what are we to make of the Road to Emmaus narrative in Luke and the Doubting Thomas narrative in John? Someone has altered details, and we don't know exactly who or why this has been done. No matter the answer we attempt to posit, one or more of the gospel narratives will be in serious error, and the historical truth still out of our grasp. Now, as it turns out, after Dr. Lacona provided the original answer we just saw, he was asked a follow-up question regarding how we're able to find truth in the Gospels, knowing that facts, like those in the resurrection appearances, have been altered. Here was his answer.
There are some cases, like I just mentioned with the Galilee or Jerusalem, where was the first appearance? I don't know. Something has been changed there for a reason that is beyond me. I don't know the reason. I haven't been able to figure it out. I don't even have a plausible explanation for it. It baffles me. All right? But it doesn't change the essence or gist of the story. The differences are in peripheral details. And whether the...
Wow. To hear Dr. Lacona, a prominent Christian apologist, admit that these accounts baffle him and that he can't even construct a plausible explanation for why one or more of the gospel authors has changed the details regarding the circumstances of Jesus' first appearance to the disciples is amazing. Rarely does one see such an honest admission. Now again, we see that despite Dr. Lacona's admitted bewilderment at these narratives, he still obviously believes that their historicity can be salvaged. His failure to explain why gospel authors altered details of Jesus' first appearance to the disciples notwithstanding, Dr. Lacona insists the story's essence remains intact, with differences only in peripheral details. We've already examined why the attribution of these differences to merely peripheral details is unconvincing. But what are we to make of Dr. Lacona's claim that the gist or essence of the story remains intact? Well, what exactly comprises the gist or essence of a narrative, let alone the gist or essence of the gospel narratives? It's hard to pin down any objective standard here. Is the empty tomb part of the essence of the resurrection narratives? Well, that seems reasonable, but one could seemingly disagree. After all, the pre-Pauline Creed in 1 Corinthians 15 makes no mention of an empty tomb, and I'd bet that most Christians would still affirm that this creed accurately relays the gist of the resurrection. What about the descriptions and behavior of the angels at the tomb? Are those part of the essence of the narratives? I think so, but again, maybe someone else disagrees. What about Jesus' ascension? Is that part of the essence or gist of the resurrection narratives? Again, one might reasonably argue that it is, and yet this essential part of the resurrection narrative is remarkably absent from all the other gospel narratives. So maybe some Christians would argue that it's not essential. It's hard to say. But do you see the problem here? There doesn't seem to be any standard that would objectively render something as part of the essence or gist of these narratives. It's completely subjective. What I take to be essential to the narrative, someone else might disagree with entirely, and there seems to be no avenue to objectively resolve the disagreement. Dr. Lydia McGrew, a philosopher and interdisciplinary scholar who's well known for her critiques of Dr. Lacona, expresses the same sentiment.
But Dr. Lacona objects to the terminology on the grounds that allegedly the changes are not essential. What he has said in his recent series of videos is that we should only call it fact-changing if it changes the essence of the story. And if it doesn't change the essence of the story or the essence of Jesus' message or something of that kind, we should not call it fact-changing. This is a fairly subjective standard. Not everyone's going to agree as to what counts as the essence of the story or the essence of the message, and it seems odd that we should have to decide first what's the essence of the story and then decide whether to call something a fact or not.
So, to return to the pertinent point in front of us, Dr. Lacona's claim that the gist or essence of Jesus' first appearance to the disciples remains consistent despite the major discrepancies in the accounts lacks adequate justification. While he might not think there's an essential difference between these pericopes, others, like myself, beg to differ, and it would appear that there's no way to resolve this disagreement. In fact, it seems that all we can agree on is this. Facts in the gospel narratives have been altered regarding Jesus' first appearance to the disciples. Once this is admitted, doubt has thus been cast upon these narratives, irrespective of talk of their gist or essence. Once the door is opened to fact altering and fabrication, it is not so easily shut, even if one wants to claim that only minor facts were altered or fabricated. Admitting that the gospel authors have changed or manufactured details significantly jeopardizes the reliability of these narratives. Dr. Lacona no doubt attempts to downplay this talk of fact altering and fabrication, but we've already seen from his own mouth that because of these altered facts, the resurrection accounts are baffling and admit of no plausible explanation for why facts were changed in the first place. When one of the leading Christian apologists for the historicity of the resurrection admits these things, it's incredibly telling. The resurrection accounts have baffled one of the premier Christian apologists, and I think they should baffle us as well. Thanks for watching.